Hey TCSTV viewers, it's Evelyn here from the camera store, and I'm coming to you live tonight because we have a very special presentation with Dave Brosha on his new titles, The Art of Misadventure and Tones of Grace. And before we get into everything, I want to thank our TCSTV live dream team for making all this happen tonight. We have Drew and Jeff working behind the scenes, and they always do such a great job of making sure that we stay live and everything goes smoothly. And of course, the thing that I love most about going live is being able to interact with all of you. So do make sure that you chat, you comment, let us know if you have any questions in the YouTube chat. And if for some reason you're not logged into YouTube and you still want to participate, my email address is evelyn@thecamerastore.com. And I'll also check there to see if there's any questions. But there's two different ways that you can participate, and we really hope that you do. I also wanted to let you know that just for tonight, because we're getting into our early Boxing Day savings or Boxing Week savings, we've actually started our 20% off all photography books at thecamerastore.com. And so it's 20% off the full collection of Dave Brosha's book. I will pop the link to all that in the chat, and so you can check it out. But we have a couple of his older titles, Northern Light, Southern Light, as well as the two new titles that we'll be highlighting tonight. And of course, if you're not already familiar with our guest, Dave Brosha, we've had him a few times with TCSTV Live, and he is passionate about a wide spectrum of photography genres. He is proudly a fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographic Society, a Sigma Pro photographer, and the co-founder of Offbeat Photographic Community. And he offers all kinds of different photography workshops and tours both across Canada and around the world. And tonight we have the opportunity to enjoy an inside look at Dave Brosha's two new books. We have The Art of Misadventure, the outtakes and mistakes of an adventurous photographer, And we also have Tones of Grace. And this contains 100 black and white images from planet Earth. And this encompasses a whole story of photography that we're going to be looking at tonight with Dave's just entertaining memoir and stories and experiences. And so I just want to welcome Dave Brosha, who's now joining us from way out east in the Maritimes. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. How's things out there?
Evelyn and the camera store team, and just it's things are great. Just kind of prepping for a big storm that's supposed to hit us tomorrow.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get into the first title that we're going to chat about tonight, which is Tones of Grace, this black and white, the selection of photography.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to share up my screen here. Just bear with me all for 1 second here, and we'll dive right into this. All right, can you see that just fine, Evelyn?
I can. That looks great.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight to talk about these two books, and it's a bit of, I guess, of a different presence here on the channel than I've had in the past, where I've talked about specific forms of photography and more about photography process and photography how-tos and technical and all that kind of stuff. To be here talking about these books is a bit of a different, I guess, mindset for me, but something that I'm very proud of. I've worked hard on these two books, and it's, I guess, come full circle, seeing them now out in the world and being able to have the opportunity to, I guess, speak a little bit to the process and everything around them. And I guess before I even get into Tones of Grace and then the Art of Misadventure, I would just like to say a huge thank you to the camera store. I think you guys are the best camera store in Canada. I've loved you guys for years, and but also give a big thanks to Rocky Mountain Books, my publisher, who for all 4 of my titles, they've been absolutely fantastic, as well as just everyone here tonight. I know we are sitting right before Christmas, and it's hard to give up an evening to I don't know, just time away from family and all the holiday activities to kind of sit in front of your computer. So I just really want to acknowledge and thank everyone for that. So what is tonight about? Well, I've broken it up between these two books, and one of the books is a photographic book, Tones of Grace, which is a black and white collection, my first, and then this other book, The Art of Misadventures, which really doesn't have any photographs at all. It's a big departure for me, I guess, in the sense that I sat for 2 years and just wrote about life and stories and things that have happened and all the good and the bad and the ugly kind of along the way. And it's about photography, but it's also not about photography. It's just about life. And so I guess that the theme of tonight is just stories. I believe the photographs that we make are visual stories, and I think that's what I'm fascinated by being a photographer, is that I have the opportunity to go out, as many of you, and capture the world around us and document it, but then share that with other people and share a place that somebody else has perhaps never been to, or share a moment that no one else has seen, or in the sense of a written book, being able to share your experience and share the things that happen along the way. So tonight's a night about stories, and I'm going to kind of dive into both those worlds, both photographic stories and the words that we put on paper, so to speak. So, for those of you who don't know me, I have trouble when people say, "What is it that you do? What is it that you like? What is it that what's on your business card?" I feel like I'm many things. I think the thing that I always go back to is that I'm a creative person. I love creativity in many different shapes and forms. I'm an author, I'm a photographer, but I think that word photographer is something that we like to dive into, or perhaps label a little bit too much. I think we tend to attach genres to that, right? We're landscape photographers, or we're portrait photographers. And I just love the idea of being a photographer. I go out and document the world around me, no matter what it is that I find interesting. I'm a dreamer, I'm a storyteller, and I think my mantra as a photographer all these years that I've been doing it is I really do believe there's beauty in this world. There's a lot of beautiful things, experiences, people, places, moments, light, and different people are drawn to different things in photography. But that's the thing that I've always been drawn to is sharing that beauty with other people. I really, really enjoy that. And I think we all have stories to tell. I am one person with a certain experience in life who shares that experience, and other people I'm fascinated by as well. That's why I just love the photographic community. I love the chance to see other people's stories and to see their images as well. So let's start tonight by talking about, I guess, this book, Tones of Grace, which came out back in, I think, mid-October. And a labor of love, absolutely. Tones of Grace comes from um, many years, I guess, of working my way through the black and white monochromatic process and starting, as many photographers do, being terrible at it and not really having any understanding of monochrome photography or how to create strongly in the black and white realm. But then somewhere along the way, you get more experience and you evolve your eye and you evolve your vision, and then you sit down and you look at things and you realize, hey, I actually have quite a few images here that I'm proud of, and maybe perhaps somebody else might be interested in those too. My my I guess black and white journey really started with these two things, which I'll dive a little bit into. They started with a gift that I was given around Christmas time a number of years ago, and a Facebook post, a social media post that I made shortly thereafter. And what do I mean by this? Like, how did these two things kind of evolve into this book called Tones of Grace? Well, I had had a degree of experience in the black and white world for sure over the course of the year. I've been a photographer since about 2002 and took it much seriously from about 2006 onwards. So I've had 15, 16 years, serious years of previous photography experience. And so I definitely dipped my toes in the black and white realm quite a bit over the course of those years, as I think many photographers do, right? We see an image, we bring it into Lightroom or to Photoshop, and we strip the color out of it and like, oh, okay, that looks pretty decent in black and white, and you put it out there into the world. And I think for many years that was my black and white experience, right? Color images that I would go out and shoot, and at some point along the way I would convert them, and some would be successful, some would look decent, but many images did not. They just didn't feel right in black and white. They did not look right in black and white. So I loved black and white photography, but I didn't really approach it with any degree of dedication or care, to be quite honest. I just it was kind of opportunistic. I think that all changed when I was gifted this book for Christmas, I think in 2015, 2016. I was given this. And anyone who has picked up a book by Sebastião Salgado knows that he's one of our world's profound photographers. He's one of our, I think, most inspirational masters of photography. And it doesn't matter what subject he tackles, whether it is humanity or terrible working conditions or wildlife, or in this case, Genesis, primarily landscape photography. All these subjects that he tackles, I just find are rich with the experience of a masterful eye and just incredible visuals. And so this book is this massive coffee table book. It's exquisite. It's beautiful. And I remember on Christmas morning flipping through this book and being instantly inspired. And some of I feel like my biggest leaps forward as a photographer over the years have come from photographic books. And I always preach to everyone about how wonderful it is to get off social media and get off Facebook and get off Instagram and actually buy a physical book, because the inspiration behind that can be absolutely incredible. And so with this book, as I was going through it, already that morning, I kind of had this idea forming where I'm like, wouldn't it be incredible to dedicate, I guess, just to a subject, the time and care that Sebastian Salgado obviously did in his book Genesis. Meaning, what if I was to spend a lot of time on one subject, which I think is one of the most profound ways to learn in photography, and whether it's choosing monochrome over color or choosing to shoot with a 200 millimeter lens as opposed to a wide angle lens, or doing a month of long exposures, right? Whatever it is, this restriction that you give yourself, I think it's one of the most profound ways to learn. So I kind of had the idea, looking through his images, looking through these wonderful places that he had visited, that it would be really a great challenge for me to do something similar. And one of the images, this one here in particular, stood out to me because this was photographed in a place called South Georgia. And for those of you who know where South Georgia is, it's close to Antarctica. And it's known as one of the most amazing combinations of landscape and wildlife in the world. And I remember just seeing this image and being floored. And what really struck me as I was looking at this book was I knew that I was going to have the opportunity to go there a very short time after I received this book. I had kind of been reached out to by an Antarctic expedition company to go down and spend some time on their ships as a photographer in residence. I was going to be going down for 7 weeks to this place, this magical place. And so I just thought, hey, how great would it be to take this inspiration from Salgado and do something similar? I'll come back to that. But one of the things that has always struck me about Salgado's work, and anyone who's ever come to one of my talks before know that I repeat this quote often, but I do so because I think it's so important. It transformed how I photographed, the mentality, I guess, behind my photographs. And he says, I always work for a group of pictures to tell a story. And if you ask me which picture in a story I like most, it's impossible for me to tell you this because I don't work for an individual picture. And that, when I read that, it was like one of the most profound light bulb moments of my career, because I think, like many people up to that point, I existed mainly for creating and sharing in the social media realm, where you create an image, you share it, you wait for likes and comments, you feel good or you feel bad, and you move on to the next image and you repeat. Reading this and just learning about his process, where he'd go out and create bodies of work and collections of work, and that the collection was more important than the individual, it just kind of changed how I approached photography. And I was very fortunate that I kind of stumbled upon this mentality many years ago, kind of with picking up that book, because it shifted everything from then on in. And so I said, kind of this whole book, Tones of Grace, started with a gift and a post. Well, here's the post I made. I made this December 27th, 2016. And I'll quickly read it. As many of you know, I've been passionate about black and white photography for quite some time in my photography. Black and white photography makes up the bulk of my own family documentation, and it's become a roughly 50-50 medium for my portrait and landscape work. In 2017, I'm taking that love to the next step. Although I'll photograph color imagery for clients for one whole calendar year, for the entirety of 2017, I'm committing myself to only shooting black and white across all my personal work. And why? I already have the love of black and white. It's not about trying to find something new that I might love, but the commitment is centered around the notion that photography is a journey, practice makes perfect, and when you do a lot of something, you inevitably do it better. So I won't read the rest of the post, but hopefully you get the idea. Basically, I was putting out into the universe that I was going to commit to a year in black and white to get better, to just see where it would lead me, if it would open doors, if it would make my work stronger. So fast forward about 10 or 12 days from that post, I find myself on a plane going down to Antarctica. Well, actually going down to Argentina, where I would get on a ship to eventually head towards Antarctica. And I'm fresh with this dream, this objective, this goal, this purpose for 2017, to only shoot black and white photography. And so I remember standing on this platform, getting ready to bring my bag aboard the ship. It was this old converted Russian research ship called the Academic Iofi. And all I had swimming in my brain was this project, this journey that I was going to be on. So excited to see a place I'd never seen before. 7 weeks um, to go across these magical lands, South Georgia, Falkland Islands, Antarctica, and to shoot it in black and white. And I remember getting aboard the ship, and this was my room. This was going to be home for 7 weeks, this tiny little bunk. I had the top bunk. And that didn't matter to me. It didn't matter to me the space that I was in, the luxury that I had or didn't have. All I could think of was this creative journey that I was about to embark on. And so my journey would take me roughly here. So leaving the southern tip of Argentina and taking me to the Falkland Islands, where you see that one marker kind of up just a little bit north of Argentina, and then over to the eastern portion, which is South Georgia, and then down to the Antarctic Peninsula. And not only would I do this loop, I would have the opportunity to basically do this loop 3 times in 6 weeks. I sailed back and forth to Antarctica 3 times on 3 different kind of trips. So I had lots of opportunity to be able to go and explore and I guess commit to this project. So an interesting thing happened though along the way. I'm here, I'm excited, I'm ready to start this black and white journey, but immediately we have a problem. So we sail from Ushuaia and we get to Falkland Islands, and I have my camera set in monochromatic mode. I'm all set to shoot black and white photos and hopefully create this new body of work. But the second we land on shore and we walk to this albatross colony, and I see these beautiful, I think the black-browed albatross, massive birds, incredible. But they have these bright orange, beautiful beaks with kind of tips of almost like a pink, a fuchsia at the end. And I'm like, oh gosh, how can I shoot this in black and white? I can't. And right away, I found myself switching to color, switching off monochromatic mode. And I break my commitment basically within the first 2 days of embarking on this commitment. And then I'm like, okay, well, Falkland Islands was a misstep. Now we're going to go to South Georgia. I'm going to shoot this in black and white. And we get to South Georgia, and the same thing repeats itself. I get there and I see this multitude of king penguins, and king penguins are absolutely beautiful. Tones of orange and yellow kind of throughout them, and they're exquisite animals, and they're just these fantastic creatures to be able to go photograph. And once again, I find myself switching out of monochromatic mode, going into color, and I'm just shaking my head. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to shoot a year. I can't even shoot a day in black and white. And then we head to Antarctica finally, and I've been dreaming about Antarctica for basically my whole life. I've always wanted to go there. It's such an impossible place to get to. And I get there and I see this profound beauty of these glow in the dark icebergs, the blues, the turquoises, the aquas. And if you can imagine this image in black and white, well, it just wouldn't work, right? You'd lose all the magic of the place. And then you see the wildlife, and oh gosh, here I go again. I'm in color. And so that whole first trip, I think it was 21 days, that first sailing from Falkland Islands to South Georgia to Antarctica and then back to Argentina, 21 days, I shot in color. I shot in color. And I remember getting back to Argentina, and we have about a day break between going and starting the next journey back to Antarctica with a new load of other people on board. And I remember looking at my images and just being thrilled that I had this experience, that I'd gone to this place. But I also remember being very disappointed in myself and looking at the images and being like, yeah, they're there. I've captured this place, I've captured some memories, but I really felt like I was capturing images that I'd seen other photographers make. And then I was capturing just scenes that weren't uniquely mine. And most importantly, I mean, this is what I felt. I felt disappointment in myself because it wasn't what I had set out to do. And so I was very fortunate that I kind of had a second kick at the can, and I knew that I had two more opportunities to go back to Antarctica again. And so the next sailing, I get back over to Antarctica, and this time I am in monochromatic mode, in black and white mode, and I start taking and making black and white photographs. And at first, I felt very unsure of myself. I had trouble seeing. I had trouble understanding tones, or maybe figuring out what would make a strong black and white subject. And I think that's evident in some of the earliest pictures I took on that next sailing as I flip through them today. But as time progressed and I started really staying in that medium, staying in that form for hours and then days and then weeks, I found that my black and white vision started getting progressively stronger. And I started being able to differentiate, even just at a quick glance, as I looked around the scenes in the world in front of me. I started being able to differentiate what would work in black and white, how tones worked, how to be able to look at different colors and understand how they would represent on your camera in monochromatic. Not only tones, but just contrast too. I'd be able to understand how to frame and compose photographs, I think, more strongly that would work from a black and white perspective, whether that was a minimalistic photograph or a close-up. You started seeing scenes where you're like, yeah, that's a beautiful black and white scene. And I guess that was kind of my objective, for my goal of giving myself this challenge to be able to understand that black and white world a little strongly. And so by the end of those next two journeys, I came back to Canada and started going through the images. And I was actually, for one of the first times in my entire career, proud of the body of work that I had set out to shoot. And I really felt like I didn't have a series of singular images that I wanted to kind of put out there on social media. I felt like I had a body of work that I was really proud that could have a home in some way, shape, or form down the road, whether that be a photo essay in a magazine or a slideshow to just share people who have a photographic interest, or perhaps a book someday. And so I'm going to share with you here a quick slideshow. I think it's about four minutes. And here's just some of the images from that first journey in black and white. After I'm through this slideshow, we'll dive a little bit more into the process of the book itself and how Tones of Grace kind of came to be. Hopefully you enjoy this.
You found warmth in a colder city. I hope its arms are strong enough. Will they hold you? Will they keep you for a long time? 'Cause I tried once. On the clouds, the ones he thought he'd have never crossed. And I guess I could sit on this jealousy, but I've cried too much. So many things I like to say, I could even sing your name. So many things I to say. So many times I like to stop, sitting quiet on the floor. So many times I like to stop. Looking back never feels right, and I wish I never wrote this song. Here I am, should I talk to myself again? Bring it on, bring it on. So many things I like to say, I could even sing your name. So many things I like to say. So many times I like to stop, sitting quiet on the floor. So many times I like to stop. So many things I like to say, I could even sing your name. So many things I like to say. So many times I like to stop, sitting quiet on the floor. So many times I like to stop.
So what did I learn from that year monochrome? Well, first of all, let me be clear. I didn't actually make it a year. I made it about 4 months when I started that second trip down, and kind of got back to Canada after that, and had a number of other travels. I lasted about 4 months, and so it was nowhere close to what I had hoped for. But it was amazing in that 4 months what I did learn. I did learn to move away from terrible images like this, which I feel like I had a lot of in my black and white portfolio ahead of time, and just images like this that just don't have anything really strong going from it in a black and white perspective, and they look very flat and gray. I didn't understand really how to see and contrast ahead of time. But one of the interesting things that I learned from that whole experience too was that shooting in black and white made my color imagery stronger. And what I mean by that is I would say I did a lot of images maybe in my first 5 to 10 years of photography that might have fell into this realm here, where you have color that might be impressive, but no real photograph, no real strong composition. You're relying exclusively on color. And when you shoot in monochromatic mode, and when you shoot with a black and white brain, you start seeing the world differently, and you start seeing that, well, maybe there's not really a strong story there to begin with, other than a little splash of color. And maybe you need a bit more from your images. So I found out of that 4 months, even when I switched back to color and photographed with a color mindset, those images got stronger because I started looking for more story. I started looking for stronger compositions. And I started seeing more potential in quote unquote flat, boring scenes. I used to be a photographer that would get quite disappointed if I'd go out and shoot, say, a colorful sunrise or colorful sunset, or hoping for a colorful sunrise, colorful sunset, and didn't get one. If you ended up with a gloomy morning or just kind of a flat, dull day, I would kind of walk away from the scene and be like, well, maybe tomorrow. Whereas now, if I went out and saw kind of a flatter looking scene, perhaps like this, I'm still looking for a stronger composition and a stronger story. And I know in my brain that could still look really strong in black and white. And so I think by sometimes us as photographers giving ourselves these restriction assignments, we can really push forward, I guess, a skill set out of that restriction, whether that is to take away color for a while or to shoot with only one lens or to try a different technique. And I think most importantly, out of this whole experience back in 2017, those words that I shared from you, that quote about this whole idea of a body of work, it became more of an integral part of me. And just to quickly show that quote again. And I think it's something that all of us should embrace, right? This idea of creating a meaningful body of work, whether that's on a subject, a theme, a place, our families, the people around us, but really diving into the subjects and kind of looking for the inherent story across that subject, rather than just those, again, singular images that we share on social media for likes. And it kind of changed how I looked at my own backyard. So I live in beautiful Prince Edward Island, and it's a very colorful place. We have a lot of reds in our soils and in our rock and even the roads across this beautiful island. And in the summertime, it's this wonderful, vibrant, colorful place. Now, when I moved here, I thought I was going to be really attracted to photographing that world, but I very quickly realized it's not that I wasn't attracted to photographing it, but I just didn't know if I had a new voice within that. I was shooting the same kind of images that I saw other people shoot, and I didn't know where my uniqueness in that fell. But after this, once I started this black and white project, I felt like my own take, my own viewpoint on this world around me that I photographed many times in color changed. And I started perhaps creating stronger images around my own backyard by stripping color out of the equation and just kind of trying to look at this world around me a little bit differently. Whether that was the underbelly of a bridge or a foggy day, me walking through the woods doing a self-portrait, or my house on a long exposure, or the moody first snows of December. I found that just this project allowed me to kind of go out and create that world a little bit differently, but knowing that all these images kind of fit together like a puzzle for perhaps a bigger meaning or bigger purpose someday. And so that purpose, I guess, came to me in the form of this book that just came out, Tones of Grace. I had worked on this body of work for, well, really 20 years, but with dedication since 2017. So about 4 years. And I have a fantastic publisher, Rocky Mountain Books, where after my first couple of books, I had the ability to pitch some ideas. And I thought of this idea that, like, I have this collection of black and white images that mean a lot to me, that I put a lot into. And I would love to do a collection around that. So it starts with an email, it starts with a pitch. And once I kind of got the go ahead from that, it really comes down to a whole lot of nerves. Like, okay, I've got this commitment from a publisher to publish this book. What's that going to look like? What does it mean? What is my voice in that? What do I want to present to the world? And I mean, I shot tens of thousands of black and white images over the course of my career, but I had maybe 1,000 images tucked away in a Lightroom collection that I really thought were decent. And so you kind of start this impossible task of being able to try to narrow those down to just a few, 100 images that you feel aren't even necessarily your best images, but that they tell a story as a collection together, that they have to kind of fit. And so after a lot of work and a lot of poring over every single monochromatic image that I had, I finally kind of got it down to 100 images. And these images kind of fit across a variety of themes and genres, which has been the story of my career. I shoot wildlife, I shoot landscape, I shoot photojournalism, I shoot portraiture. But to me, the overarching, I guess, theme of this book and the images within it is I felt that they had to stand on their own in terms of a story. There had to be something there visually to interest and excite me, because if they didn't, I don't think they would excite anyone else. And so once I have the images, then I kind of go to the words and putting down to paper and writing and editing and rewriting and editing, soliciting a forward, and kind of pulling together all the multitude of parts that go into a book, which is really actually a lot of work. And then you kind of go back and forth with your publisher with the ideas of cover selection. And here's a couple of the covers that didn't make the cut for Tones of Grace. But it's just such an interesting, fascinating process to me. That creating a book is an art form, and it's not my best art form, right? It's somebody else's best art form. That's why we have talented designers and publishers out there that can do some of this stuff. And I very much trust their guidance and their vision within this. And this ended up being the final selection and the cover. And I really love it. It's just simple. I think it goes with the title, Tones of Grace. I feel like it's a graceful cover. And very, very happy with that end process. And if you allow me just a quick moment to shout this out, I'm quite proud of this too, because this kind of came out of this book. Just today, by chance, Black and White Photography magazine out of England released this cover, and it's a feature on the book. And I've loved and idolized this magazine since I was a young photographer, and just very proud to have the cover and to have this feature on Tones of Grace within the pages of Black and White Photography magazine out today. I'm going to go on to misadventures here shortly, but very quickly, just to remind people of what Evelyn said at the start. And the Camera Store is very supportive of the photographic community here, not just in Southern Alberta, but I think across Canada, which I'm very, very grateful for. And they carry all my books. And as was mentioned at the start, I think right now they have a 20% special on all of them. So I just wanted to say that. So I have one more slideshow here with images, and then we're going to go on to this, which is the Art of Misadventure, which doesn't have images. So it's going to be very image-less transition here. I'll have a few images just to go with some of the stories, but I have one more quick slideshow before that, and allows me a quick opportunity for a sip of water, and I hopefully you enjoy this. This slideshow here is very much tied to a lot of the imagery that is in the book, Tones of Grace.
Hallowed be thy name, for the name success feels like a failure on that expectation meter. Ooh. Find the right notes, put words to measure. You've gotta paint that perfect picture. Ooh. King of the harvest, king of big pink, king of the smile, baby, just don't think. King of the background. Kenny and Johnny, Bob and Levon, you were king of their hearts, but you had to move on. King of the background. King of the background. Every success feels like a failure on that expectation meter. Ooh. Find the right notes, put words to measure. You've gotta paint that perfect picture. Ooh. Find the right notes, put words to measure. You've gotta paint that perfect picture. Ooh.
Just want to give a quick shout out on that particular song on the slideshow. It's done by Canadian artist Dana Manning, called King of the Background. Absolutely love her work and her music. So let's shift gears here a little bit to this other book, The Art of Misadventure. And it's a really weird thing to be promoting and talking about two different books with two vastly different subjects at the same time. I never dreamed that I would even have one book in my life, let alone have two come out in the exact same month. But I really, again, want to thank R&B Books for believing in what I do and this project here, Art of Misadventure. So what is the Art of Misadventure? The outtakes and mistakes of an adventurous photographer. Well, really, this actually started in Antarctica too, if I'm being honest about it. When I was on that exact same trip that the black and white kind of journey kicked off on, one of our taskings on board the ship as quote unquote experts in our field, right? They would have, whether it was somebody who was really good at biology or somebody who was great at birds or somebody who's a photographer, they'd have these different people on board the ship to give talks here and there. And one of the things that they did was something called these bar side chats, where they were kind of less formal presentations, where people at the end of a day of going out and venturing and taking photographs and seeing penguins and all this wonderful thing, you'd kind of sit in the bar of the ship and you would have a drink and listen to a quick 10-15 minute lighthearted, usually presentation from one of the people aboard the ship. And so I got tasked and asked to do one of these, and I was like, oh gosh, what can I talk about aside from me just showing photographs? And I forget who it was. It was somebody on the ship. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you've had some good stories happen to you over the course of your career. And I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, this happened and that happened. And so I started thinking about what are some of the things outside the photography itself that have happened to me over the course of my, not only career, but my life. And so this book kind of was born out of that. That little seed was planted, and I started writing down some of these experiences. And I realized that as I started writing them down, that as many of those experiences, if not more, came from outside of my photographic world, just different things that happened in my life or as I was growing up. as happened with the camera kind of around my neck. But they all kind of fit together in the grander scheme, that they were my stories. They were my experience. And there were some things that were funny that had happened to me. There were some things that were terrible that had happened to me. There were some things that were that I was proud of, and other things I wasn't proud of. But just started writing this stuff down, and realized when I came kind of towards the end of it that I had a lot of just little interesting things that I thought other people might possibly be interested in too. So that's kind of how this book was born. Because I really believe in this. And I think this came clear to me the more that I wrote. We all have a story to tell, and all of our lives are interesting. A lot of people, I think, sit back and just look at, I don't know, people out there doing things, people that are climbing a mountain or researching a cure for some terrible disease, or traveling to the other side of the world. I think people look at people like that as the interesting ones. But I think everyone in their lives have things that happen that other people would find enjoyable or funny or sad or everything in between. And I really believe that. And I think it's important for people to share some of those stories with other people, because we have this one life and we have this one experience. And I don't know, just to me, that gives it all a little bit more purpose. I was very fortunate to grow up in a family. I grew up in northern Alberta in a little tiny place called Fort Vermilion. It's a community, a hamlet of about 800 people. My father was a teacher up there. But I grew up in a family that very much appreciated many things, but one of the things they appreciated were the outdoors. It was their playground. We kind of grew up in the forests and along the banks of the Peace River, and just in this, that was my playground. That was my backyard. And grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money, but very much appreciated storytelling. My mother would read to us at night, and we were always playing make-believe and just kind of going out there and doing these different things. And it was wonderful. I had a great childhood in that capacity. But as kind of I get older, and then things happen, right? This ended up being kind of one of the stories in the book about a terrible car accident I got into. I broke both my legs in a head-on collision when I was 16. It was entirely my fault. And then eventually get to college. And in college, I very much suffered from this. What to do when you have no clue what you want to do. I remember trying to figure out my life's purpose and bouncing between different programs at university. I think I changed my area of study 3 or 4 different times, and finally settled upon English literature. I had this aspiration of being a writer, but didn't know how to go about doing that, and I wasn't very successful. I remember submitting stuff to different magazines and publications and journals, and just getting rejection notice after rejection notice. So you change gears, you just live your life, you figure things out. And I ended up doing this. I ended up buying a food truck and some hot dog carts. And this was my career for a little bit, Dave's Canteen in Nova Scotia. And eventually, though, this led me to my next path, my next stage, which ended up being up in the Arctic, where really I think the whole 2.0 of my life began. It's because it's where I found my passion of photography. I ended up in this tiny little place, Resolute Bay, Nunavut, 230 people, one of the most isolated communities in Canada, the second most northerly community in Canada, place where the sun would disappear for 3 months every year and not break horizon for those 3 months. You'd go home at lunchtime on your break from work, and it would be pitch black. And for 3 months. And then in the summer, it was the opposite, 24 hours of sunlight. But it was up there that I discovered photography. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I loved pressing that button. I loved exploring the world around me. It reconnected me, I think, with that youth growing up in northern Alberta of just wanting to be outside. I think I'd lost that for a number of years before I rediscovered it. And the camera was that tool. And the images I photographed up there weren't that great. I can look back upon them now and critique them and realize they didn't have much in the way of composition or much in the way of story, but that didn't matter. The story of my life, I guess, had changed being up here and being in this wonderful world of igloos and icebergs and polar bears and tundra, and just this really fascinating place. So, which leads me to the book and this idea of misadventures. Some of you may have heard this story before. I'm going to tell you a story that you probably have heard before if anyone has followed me at all, or if you're new to this, hopefully you enjoy this story. Then I'm going to read from the book and tell you a story that you probably haven't heard before. So what is the Royals? Well, this was one of my biggest misadventures in the world of photography. It was a number of years ago, I think maybe 2011, where I got a phone call one day from somebody that I knew in government, and they were very sketchy, very ominous, and not very forthcoming with details. They said to me, they just gave me a date and said, "Are you free on this date to photograph?" And I looked at my calendar. I said, "I am." They're like, "Okay, can we book you in?" And I said, "Sure, what for?" And they said, "Well, we can't tell you." Okay. This is different, but I put it into my calendar. I trusted this person. And it wasn't for another few weeks, a month, I can't remember, afterwards, they contacted me again and they said, "Okay, well, if you're going to take this job, there's a number of things that we have to do. We have to do a security check, and you have to absolutely commit to these 3 days, and you have to sign off on these different protocols and this and that." And I finally got to the bottom of why and found out that Prince William and Kate Middleton were going to be traveling up to Northern Canada, and they wanted me to be the official photographer for that event. And so I was beyond excited. This was an incredible opportunity to photograph two of the world's most famous people. And just, but aside from the whole fame aspect of it, just I enjoy challenges. I enjoy photographing outside of my comfort zone. I enjoy photographing subjects and just looking for the story within it. And so I can remember as this day approaches, I'm getting more and more nervous, but also more and more excited. And I mean, they arrived and there was wonderful weather for those couple days, and they were lovely to photograph, and kind of had the opportunity to follow them to their different events and be kind of on the other side of the curtain, going out and shooting them, right? Rather than back with all the paparazzi with these giant lenses, I was kind of walking with them and had the opportunity to go out and just shoot it kind of from a photojournalistic perspective, all these little moments that happen within that, right? Whether it be Prince William playing hockey with a bunch of local Yellowknife students, or just these kind of more quieter, intimate moments between the two of them. I just found it all fascinating. But even before all of this, the very first assignment that I was given by the government in this tasking was to photograph kind of this formal portrait of them, along with some other VIPs and dignitaries when they very first arrived on day one. And so preparation for this kind of formal sit-down portrait, which was going to take place kind of in this hotel room in Yellowknife, it took me hours of preparation, kind of going and clearing out space and just figuring out how the chairs were going to kind of be laid out and how to light it. And I remember going through this entire process for hours and hours and hours ahead of kind of their arrival, and even having hotel staff coming and sitting in the chairs and kind of just taking test shot after test shot, making it as perfect as I can make it. And so that evening kind of happens, and I'm I'm there and I'm set up and I've had my equipment searched by security detail and the RCMP and everything else, making sure that everything's good. And so I'm set up. I hear this cheer kind of come down the hallway of the hotel. I know that Prince William and Kate have arrived. I know they're getting closer. I'm starting to just shake and get nervous. This is kind of the biggest assignment I've ever had in my career up to this point. And they walk in the room and they kind of make their way around the outer circle of this room, shaking hands. And then I'm basically I was directed ahead of time that I'm to kind of direct them, to tell them where to sit and to tell them what to do. But I'm only given 90 seconds for this assignment. That's all I have to kind of shoot this formal portrait. And so I direct them, I say, and my voice is breaking and squeaking. I tell them to sit down and I explain to them, hey, I'm going to take probably about 10 photographs and I'm addressing them, but I'm addressing this whole group of 12 dignitaries. And I say, if everyone could just look at the camera and smile, it'd be quick and easy and painless. And so I start shooting and I shoot a shot and shoot another shot. And then by shot 3, I realize that something's not quite right. And I get this kind of feeling in my gut. I'm like, oh gosh, what's happening here? And I realize out of the corner of my eye that I'm not seeing my lights fire, right? Just darkness. My triggers aren't working, nothing. And so I press the shutter again, nothing. I press the shutter again, nothing. And without those lights firing, I mean, the way I've set up my shot is I don't have a shot. I haven't exposed for any of the ambient light. It would just be nothing, really. And I'm getting sicker and sicker and sicker to my stomach. Another shot, another shot. And I don't see these lights going off. And I start panicking. I start just almost like hyperventilating. What am I going to do here? Right? Do I tell this whole room full of people, that some of the just most important people in the Northwest Territories and Prince William and Kate Middleton, that I need to troubleshoot this and figure this out? Or do I just go ahead and lie and say that it's all good and my memory card has corrupted? I don't know what to do. But I kind of just say, okay, I'm going to take a look at the photographs on the back of my camera. And I look down and I hit the play button on my camera and I see this. Black. Nothing. Like, oh gosh. Whew. And I go back to the next picture and black. Nothing. And I repeat that. Another time, black. Another time, black. Another time, black. And my career is done. I don't know how do you get out of this? How do you fix this? I don't know what to do. I go back, black. Another one, black. And I go back one more time and I see a flash of color. I'm like, oh gosh. And I see on the back of my screen them all sitting there. And I look at it and I zoom in and holy smokes, every single person is looking and their eyes are open and they're smiling. And I look up at the crowd and say, thank you, I've got the photo. And everyone was like, oh, great. And they laughed. And this was the photo. And it worked. That one picture, the lights fired, and every other picture they didn't. And it's all the client wanted, though, and it's all they needed. And they were happy with this picture. And thank God. I still to this day don't know what happened on the other fires, why those lights didn't trigger. Anyways, it stopped my heart. Story number 2. Now, I've never actually done this before. I've never been asked to do this, but I'm going to actually read from my book here, if you bear with me. And just, Evelyn, if you're out there, from a time-wise perspective, I might have maybe 10 or 15 more minutes to go through before questions, if that's okay. Okay. Perfect. I'm going to go off this view, and I'm just going to kind of go on camera view and read from my book, if you'll bear with me. Okay. So I want to read a story here called Skunked. And it's one of the last stories in my book. And it's about my father. And my father was an interesting character for anyone who met my father. And I think I learned a lot about life from the way he approached life. And if you bear with me, I'm going to read this chapter. My father, Louis George Brosha, was a skinny farm kid from Heatherton, Nova Scotia, born in the late 1940s into a massive Catholic birth control shunning family with 12 siblings, 2 old school hardworking parents, many dairy cattle, and a childhood of more shenanigans and misadventures than I've ever been able to learn and properly keep up with. Dad was, in short, a character. I come by misadventures naturally, to be certain. My mother, of course, would come to know this. In fairness, she should have known right from the very start of their life as a young couple. Her first introduction to him was via her friend Sheila. Mom was a proper townie from nearby Antigonish, and Dad was a full-on, ill-mannered country bumpkin. He was the opposite of proper. Still, Sheila thought that they should meet, and she decided one week to play matchmaker. On the fateful evening they met, Sheila went to the front door of my mother's house, knocked on the door, and smiled excitedly when my mother, Eleanor, answered the door. Elle, how are you? I have someone to introduce you to. My mom just looked past her, confused. Sheila looked at Mom's face and then turned around. Louis, who she thought was behind her, well, he wasn't there. He was just here. Louis. My mom was the first to spot him, her eyes scrunched up, not really comprehending what she was seeing. But oh yes, dear God, she was seeing exactly as it was. Dad was in her flower bed, peeing on her family's flowers. Oh, hi there, he shouted to them, smiling. He was always smiling. I'm 7, maybe 8 years old. Dad and I are driving the dusty back roads of Fort Vermilion, Alberta, looking for rough grouse to hunt. Sometime in last year, Dad has taught me the subtle art of shooting grouse with a .410 gun. It's one of the smallest of shotguns, and it doesn't bruise my shoulder the way his big shotgun does. I appreciate that. I love my .410, but I love not having bruises on my shoulder even more. Hunting rough grouse is easy, I find, because even when you line up a shot and miss, I missed a lot in those early days, the grouse often don't move. They just stand there, looking stunned, pondering why their head feathers shook on a non-windy day and why thunder is loudly booming, even when the sky is blue. In the year that I've been hunting, who lets a 7-year-old shoot a gun? I've progressed from blasting a bird in the middle of the body and filling it up with pellets to being able to aim with enough precision to make a headshot. It helps that I can basically walk up to within 10-15 meters of the grouse we find and they don't fly away. Grouse aren't the brightest of birds. Anyways, we'll find the grouse on this drive. We always do. Fast forward. Dad needs to roll a cigarette. Instead of pulling over, he just looks down as he drives and he pulls out his pouch of tobacco and starts rolling the cigarette. I've been through this before. I slide through the endless pre-seatbelt laws of our big green Oldsmobile, and I grab the wheel and peer over the dashboard and steer down the dirt road. Dad doesn't look up once. He's busy, unless I tell him there's a turn coming. Hey, Dad, you might want to slow down. Turn coming up. He doesn't slow down. On these occasions, I grip the wheel, terrified as the car skidded around the corner, its back end always seemingly moments away from fishtailing and spiraling us out of control and into the forest or into Billy Lambert's wheat field. But it never happened, at least not while I was steering. He knew the precise speed to stick to that allowed him to successfully roll his cigarette, and he trusted me. When he finishes rolling it, he takes back the wheel, and I slide back to the passenger seat. As he goes to light it, however, he realizes he can't steer and light a cigarette at the same time. Solution? He passes me the cigarette and his matches and tells me to light it. If it won't take, put it between your lips and suck in a little while lighting it. That should do the trick. I do, of course, and choke down a mouthful of putrid smoke. It's gross, but I'm happy. I've successfully lit it for him, and he's beaming. He continues barreling down the road, smiling and smoking, and as he stares out the side window, scanning for trees for grouse, we hear thump, 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 thump. He stops. We get out, and we see a dead grouse behind the car. I knew we'd find him. That's how it's done, boy. Success. In 2013, I lost my dad. He'd been struggling with multiple sclerosis, MS, for many years. But his death came at a relatively young age, all things considered, and hit the entire family suddenly and unexpectedly. I got the call when I was living in Yellowknife. my home for the better part of a decade. My brother phoned in the middle of the night. I was told that he was, as they say, on the way out, and that I should get my ass home. I did. I made it home and just in time. About 12 hours after I landed, I knelt by his bedside in a Halifax hospital and I squeezed his hand. Shortly thereafter, he took his final breath. I got to say goodbye, which I'll be eternally grateful for. My older sister, Audrey, also passed suddenly the following year. In that case, I wasn't so fortunate. In the few days following his passing were what one might expect. A lot of tears shed among my siblings, my mother, and me, with his many brothers and sisters and friends, and former students and customers. Dad was a well-loved teacher for 25 years in Northern Alberta before my mother and him took over a highway side convenience store. And I don't think any of us, as cliche as kids, realized just how many people he had impacted. Funeral day, Heatherton, Nova Scotia, a little town in the middle of rural Nova Scotia countryside, the community where he grew up, where his own father and mother raised a massive clan of children. It's fitting that he's also to be buried there, close to his own parents. We're sitting in church. Sadness. It's what funerals are, aren't they? I knew is that we felt so much pervasive sadness that day, such a heavy weight. It's not a cliche, heavy weight. It's the simple reality. My mother, she's sitting a few people down from me in the front church pew in the small church. A few siblings separate her and me. The funeral overall is progressing nicely. We're going through all the motions and everyone is sufficiently and genuinely sad. The priest says what he's supposed to say and the songs are nice and tragic and we're just getting on with it. One part stoic, one part drained, two parts emotional mess. As the priest continues leading the service, I see the funeral director slowly and quietly making his way up the aisle to my mom. I'm intrigued and a little confused as he whispers in her ear. I can tell she doesn't really grasp what he's saying. She scrunches up her face. She's asking him to repeat what he just said to her, only more slowly and clearly. He does. I see him lean in really close. His lips almost touch her ear. There's no way I can pay attention to what the priest is saying. What is going on? Why is he interrupting right now in this moment? He finishes saying what he has to say. She processes. Time ticks on and on and on. Then it happens. She lets out a huge laugh. A massive, full-on, rip-roaring guffaw right in the middle of church during a funeral. My own mother. I'm a little shocked and dismayed. What has she done? The entire church is looking at her, looking at us. This is no time or place for laughter. I sink down into my seat, trying to hide from all the stares, hide from her laugh, which is still bouncing off the pew and the holy water and the communion wafers. The priest looks up startled, concerned. He scowls. And then he realizes it's my mom, and he relaxes. She's going through a lot. The look on his face says, I'm kind of mad at her, not him, and entirely confused. I can't help it. I glare toward her, my eyes screaming, what is going on? Only she doesn't see me. There's two siblings between me and her. She whispers to one of my sisters, Trisha. Like a scene from Groundhog Day, the cycle plays out again. Trisha scrunches up her brow, processing what she's just heard. She asks Mom to speak slowly and repeat. Trisha starts laughing loud. She's dying at a funeral. This plays out again. She leans in and whispers to my brother Stephen, who's also angry. But he hears what they have to say, and he starts loudly laughing. The entire church is staring at us, the Broshas, the family of stark raving lunatics. I'm still in the dark, but I find this little whisper procession. Finally, this little whisper procession reaches me. I glare at Stephen. He leans into me and whispers. I blink and then blink again, processing. I look back at him with my eyebrows raised. He leans in and whispers more slowly. I can't believe what I'm hearing. I laugh hard. I learn that the burial, which is supposed to happen directly following the service, has to be postponed per the funeral director. This, of course, isn't funny. It would actually be quite alarming, that little piece of news. I never heard of, at least in those parts of Nova Scotia, a burial being postponed. I've stood through burials in sideways rain, sleet, snow. Usually they're short affairs, a few words from a priest, a few prayers, a coffin being lowered, a handful of dirt thrown in, or in many Nova Scotia funerals, a sprinkle of rum or whiskey. Rain or shine, you suck it up, you pay your respects, it's what you do. The small ripple of laughter has turned into a wave, like the type you'd see at a sporting event. It has spread through and infected the entire church. The church is laughing as one. Even the priest can't help it. Someone whispers in his ear, and he breaks out in a grin. Through the night, a skunk has somehow made its way down into the open grave. And well, it settled down into there pretty good, daring one and all to try to move them. And well, no one wanted to try, at least in their good clothes. No, sir, we'd wait this one out. Eventually, the skunk would move on in its own time. Somewhere, we all knew that my father, Pepe Le Loup, was having the last laugh. Miss you, Dad. Part of the reason of writing this book, Evelyn, was just, I don't know, we have these professional, I guess, facades that we put on a bit, and we talk very stoically about the images we create, and try to be as poetic as possible and kind of describing the way beams of light hit mountains and all that stuff. But I mean, the fact of the matter is people mess up a lot and they laugh a lot, and there's good things that happen, bad things that happen, and interesting things that happen. And I think it's really important that we spend some attention on that we tell some of those stories. And I just know so many people don't have a chance to tell their story. They have things taken from them too young, or too, they never have those opportunities, so they don't think about it. And I guess part of my inspiration for writing this book was to hopefully inspire other people to tell a little bit of their story, or whether that's through pictures, whether that's through words. You can impact the people around you. You can make them smile at the very least. And I hope people feel that message if they take the time to read the book. And I just, maybe I'll leave it there. I just thank you very much for having me here on this platform today. And thank everyone else for sitting through this. And if anyone has any questions, by all means.
Absolutely. Well, we have some big fans in the audience tonight. Some of the comments have been that, this has been such a fun read for people. There was one lady in here, I'm trying to find her name, who said she got it. She read through it in 5 hours. That was Tracy. And I would have to agree. I think that this book is just so fun. It's full of laughs. It's full of some tears, and cringy moments. I mean, all of us here in the studio tonight, when you were telling the royal story, we're like, oh, like we've been there. We can feel that as photographers, and yeah, it's just such a fun thing, and I hope that more people can experience it. But thank you so much, Dave. It's been great. We do have a few questions in the chat here, and I encourage everyone that if you have any burning questions for Dave related to these two titles, or really anything else, please do add them to the chat, and we'll get through as many as we can before we wrap things up. So first of all, we have a question here that goes back to Tones of Grace, and this was from Bree, and she was wondering, in your photographic process, do you photograph black and white images in JPEG only using monochrome view on your camera, or do you capture them raw and then convert?
Yeah, no, great question, Bree. So I would say originally for the first 10 years, as I mentioned, I would take photographs in color, raw, and then just pick the odd one out and convert it into black and white. Now, almost every time that I photograph a black and white image I love, I end up shooting in monochromatic mode in camera. And I kind of bounce back and forth between two ways of doing it. I either just shoot straight up raw, which for the most part gives you your color image when you bring it into Lightroom or whatever processor that you use. So I know that I have to go back and reconvert that into black and white afterwards. But there's sometimes when I'm photographing, especially if I'm going out and photographing a big dedicated day to black and white, I'll change my camera mode to raw plus JPEG so that I can have the full color, the color raw file, which I can convert to black and white, but they also have the black and white JPEG that I like to just sometimes use as a reference point, right? That I can actually see what I was seeing when I was out in the field, because it sometimes helps me reprocess that color raw file, maybe closer to the vision that I was actually shooting in the field. So yeah, I kind of go both ways, but for the most part, probably just shoot raw though, get the file in color and then reconvert it.
Now, when you were attempting to do your year of photographing everything in black and white, did you find that when you're out in the world that you changed your way of seeing? Like, were you seeing stuff in black and white and almost converting it in your brain? And can you talk a little bit about what that seeing black and white process was like for you?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I don't think before I tried those 4 months of dedicated black and white shooting, I really didn't understand the difference between color tonality, right? I'd see green, I would see brown, I would see blue, yellow, and not really understand the relationship of how that would render in black and white, and or how things would contrast against each other, right? If you have a dark green leaf with a brown, dark wooden trunk in the background, if you're in the forest, that you're not going to have a lot of contrast between those two color tones. And I think one of the things that shooting black and white exclusively dedicated kind of taught me was to really start recognizing those nuances, the nuances between color tonality, but also the differences between just light and shadow, right? And how much contrast plays a big part, I think, in a lot of the strongest black and white images, to be able to see what images in real time, to your point, process in your brain kind of as you're there, to know what images will be a strong black and white rendering. And it very much, like, I would highly recommend that to anyone listening here tonight. If you want to get better at something, pour yourself into that for whatever time frame that you can afford in your own creative schedule, right? If you want to get better at portraits, lighting, to give yourself 3 months of just, okay, I'm going to try this every day or every week. If you want to become better at black and white, go out and do it for 24 hours, or do it for a week, or do it for 4 months. If you can, you will get better, plain and simple.
A question here in regards to the process of writing your book. Now, of course, as a photographer, in the past, I've heard you talk about the photographic discipline of being able to get out there and try to shoot all the time. But when you're switching gears and now you're doing storytelling through written word, how did you find your discipline had actually changed?
I actually found I had to learn how to write while writing that book. In the sense that, like, I could always put words to paper. I'd written for magazines for quite a few years, and I knew how to hammer out 1,500 words or 2,500 words on one subject. But when I started writing this book, I actually became lost in that process for the first couple months, and I don't feel like I made a lot of progress because it just seems so daunting, right? To write a book, to write 50,000 or 75,000 words just felt impossible to me. And so I found that I floundered a lot. I would write like little bits here and there, but nothing really connected, and it was very disjointed. But I think that what I learned in that process is that you have to just break, like learning anything, like learning how to shoot monochrome, or learning photography, or learning how to play the guitar. You have to break it into little chunks. And so the discipline that I found was that I would just set myself a goal of 1,500 words a day, or even 1,000 words a day, right? And just hammer it out. And then you can always clean up and refine things afterwards. And I would just take it chapter by chapter. Okay, this chapter, I'm going to try 1,000 words a day and just see where it goes. And some of those chapters took a week, some of them took 2 days, some of them took 2 weeks. But each time one of them would be done, you could see the real progress. You could see the story coming together. You can see the word count increase, and which felt good, right? So like it was a process. It was a difficult process at the start. It became much easier towards the end, but it was a very rewarding process too.
Excellent. Okay, we'll do one more question here from the chat. So has your post-processing changed for your black and white images?
Absolutely. So I feel like when I post-process a color image, I'm very interested in the subtle nuances of contrast, and I don't like really heavily processed color images. It's not the style I'm drawn to. But in black and white, it's almost like that gets completely shifted for me anyways. I really appreciate strong contrast black and white images, where sometimes you're pulling down the blacks and pulling up the whites to an extreme level to kind of help achieve that contrast, or you're dodging and burning certain areas of a photograph with a much heavier hand than I think I would in the color realm. So yeah, bottom line, it's a different brain set that I kind of go into monochromatic post-processing from color.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much, Dave, for taking the time to share both of these books. As you said earlier on, they're very different, but I think it's such a wonderful way for you both to tell your story through both Tones of Grace and The Art of Misadventure. I will mention one more time to our audience that we do have a special promo. We started our Boxing Day sale early just for this event on books, and so you can get 20% off of any of Dave Brosha's titles on our website. So I'll post that one more time in the chat. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And of course, we hope you have a very good Christmas, Dave.
Same to you. And just once again, I'll just thank your entire team. I really think it's wonderful what you are doing and how much you guys support this artistic photographic community. And it's really special. So thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. And again, thank you to all the viewers for joining tonight on this December evening. We hope that you guys enjoyed this presentation. And if you'd like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And you can also head over to thecamerastore.com and click on the events tab to see what we have coming up next. Until next time, we'll catch you again very soon.